Welcome and thank you for joining today. My name is Phil Blair from the Business Growth Hub, and I'm going to be hosting this webinar on market opportunities. It's the last in our current series of Here for Business webinars. Over the last 8 weeks, we've heard a lot about challenging economic environment, practical ways to manage rising costs, some opportunities to improve efficiency, and some advice on skills development and well-being. In this last session, we hope to excite you about the opportunities for growth, both here in the UK and internationally. Growth is both exciting and key for business success. It helps attract and retain talent, acquire assets and investment, and drive business performance and profit. I'm joined today by a great panel of experts. They'll introduce themselves as they talk through, but very briefly, we've got Sean from an agency Much Clearer. We've got Christiane, founder and CEO of Biramis, Christos from the DIT, Shehla from Manchester India Partnership, and Yunyang from the Manchester China Forum. We're going to start today with a session on growth itself. Sean is going to give us an insight into some of the techniques that many high growth businesses use today. We're then going to go on a whistle-stop tour of the world, starting with here in the UK with Christiane, moving through our biggest trading bloc next door to us, Europe, through India, and finally ending up in China. And then we'll finish the session with a Q&A at the end. Just a few points of admin. If you'd like to ask a question as we go through, just pop it in the chat box and we'll pick it up at the end. If you'd like the slides, there's a QR code at the end, which you can just scan, and you can also use that to either ask questions or follow up with any of us. So let's get on. So over to you, Sean, for growth.
Grand, thanks very much. Can you hear me, everyone? Okay, lots of nods. Thank you. Morning, everyone. Well, so my name is Sean Sankey, as Phil has introduced us. And since about 2018, I've been working with the Growth Hub, helping deliver what they call the Global Scale-Up Program. So this is a specific offer for companies in Greater Manchester that are really looking to double down on their export efforts and expand the footprint internationally. It's been a lot of fun doing that program over the last, I'd say, 4 years. We kept it live through COVID. And over the last 4 years, we've probably had about 100 companies, maybe more now, come through 5 cohorts of the program. And in preparation for this webinar, I was reflecting back on a lot of the conversations that I've had with those kind of businesses, you know, kind of small to medium businesses, typically employing like up to 50 people, and thinking about what their main challenges are when it comes to finding and going after new market opportunities. And what's really interesting is when we speak to those kind of businesses, it's not really discovering the best market opportunities to go after. That's not the primary blocker to expanding your footprint internationally or just growing generally. It's not finding the one market opportunity that is right. The biggest problem is navigating the complexity of making a decision about which one of the infinite number of choices that I could go for do I double down on? Given the fact that I'm a small business with limited time, capacity, and cash, what are the right calls to make for right now, for exactly where I am? Because like we'll hear today about 6 different geographies probably, and the potential to grow. You know, do I start off in Europe? Do we go to the US where, you know, we've got the English language advantage? I've got some relationships in the Middle East. Is that the right place to start? And if you make a decision on a territory, you then start thinking about, well, okay, what roles do I need? How do we adapt our existing product set? Do I need to partner up or do I go alone? How much should I invest? There's this absolute infinite number of questions that come to mind when you're trying to move into new markets. And to paint an even bleaker picture, if you're part of a senior team where, let's say there's 4 of you, you've got 4 people who are wrestling with all of those different question sets and want to answer those questions in a different order, in a different way, and at different times. And this is the complexity. This is the main problem that we find when folks go, right, we're doing all right domestically, but if we really want to like kind of expand into a whole new different area, crikey, you almost open up Pandora's box. Now, often when teams are facing that kind of difficulty, they'll get a consultant in or an advisor, and that advisor will rock up with a cheesy deck, which probably has a photo of someone holding a light bulb in there, and it will say, what you really need, sir and madam, is a strategy. Let's build a strategy. And often that feels really intellectually satisfying. It's like, right, okay, well, let's go away for a couple of days. Let's do a load of research. Let's build out some channel maps and some boards and come together with a really nice document. But we all know, if we've been in business more than, like, say, 5 minutes, let's say 5 years, often a strategy isn't enough. And often we put too much stock into intellectually trying to solve the problem in a boardroom, as opposed to just doing stuff in the market that's fast and cheap and gives us feedback to help us really get the data we need to know how to answer those questions. So why am I setting this all up this way? Because we want to avoid the headache of sinking too much time into strategy. Now, don't get me wrong. I made a career on building out strategies. I'm not against strategy totally. Don't go away from this webinar and go, oh, Sean hates strategy, let's write him off, right? That's not it. My point is that often strategy isn't enough, and it doesn't answer the questions that you're trying to answer if you want to move internationally. Because what most small businesses don't need is a better strategy. You need a better mode of execution. Now, what do I mean by that? Most of us don't need a better plan. We need a really rigorous way of executing, learning, and feeding that learning back into what we're doing as we're investing our limited time and cash into trying to take a new market opportunity. Because looking after your core business is hard enough, right? But actually trying to take ground in a different territory or in a different sector, like, you've got to be super smart at how you iterate and learn from the actions that you're taking. You need a way of prioritizing stuff and then quickly getting that into being aligned as a team. You need a way of being busy and moving at pace, but instead of that feeling like chaos, it starts to create momentum in one direction. And you need a way of getting real data, like actual information from the market, and feeding that into how you're iterating your plan on your product. So what have we done in light of this? Because I think that's the reality that most businesses are contending with. Well, back in 2018, we launched this thing called a growth sprint. So a growth sprint is, well, how did it come about? Well, as I say, we've done 8 cycles of it now, 5 on the global scale-up program. We've taken 100 companies through it, kind of talked to a few of these things. So let me tell you about where the growth sprint came from. My background is in technology. So I've worked for the last 10, 15 years in both blue chips and in small creative digital companies and tech startups. And I fell in love with the idea of what's called design sprints. So design sprints, popularized in this book. You can't see it because the background. There we go. No, I'll put it in front of my face. You can see it there. It was authored by a guy at Google called Jake Knapp. So that smiley Canadian there was tasked with the problem that Google had back in the late 2010s, when they were frustrated with the speed at which they could produce product and get it out to market. Now think about that. Google, the best funded, most highly equipped company on the planet probably at the time, was saying we're too slow in getting stuff out to market. How can we speed that up? That was a question they were asking themselves. Now, Jake was on a team that was working on Google Meet, and he worked historically on Google Calendar. He'd worked on some pretty chunky products that Google had taken out to market. And he and his colleagues started to address that question by saying, right, instead of taking 6 months to do a classical software build release schedule, where you come up with some concepts, you might do some prototypes, you go and talk to some users, and you eventually, way down the line, launch something. They said, could we compress 6 months of work into 5 days? And could we take all of the stuff that we would normally do and compress that into a really structured process? And they did, and they called it sprint. Now, this is an agile sprint. A lot of you will be familiar with that. This is specifically called a design sprint. And so he wrote the book. He popularized the method. They started to do a lot of sprints inside Google and inside Google Ventures. And eventually, after Jake wrote the book, because Google let him have the IP, lots of other businesses popularized it and started to build and release software in that way. Now, I was lucky enough to go out to Google in 2018 to help train people at Google who, with a straight face, they call themselves Googlers. I kid you not. If you work at Google, they call themselves Googlers. They often get outside facilitators like me in to come and train them on how design sprints are being used in the wild. Now, at that event, which is the photograph there, started to talk with a few people about how design sprints needn't be limited to just the process of building software. Because effectively, what design sprints are is just a really great toolkit to attack complex problems and speed up your execution, right? And so we started to play with, well, what could it look like to adapt the toolkit and think about growth? How could we use these exercises and these tools and these techniques to blast through what often can take a lot of time and a lot of money, and get to more of a high tempo testing type approach? And that's what we did. We took the toolkit from the sprint, we call it a growth sprint. We figured out how to compress it even further into like a day or two. And we've been doing those with companies across Manchester since 2018. Now, what a growth sprint gets you, the practical thing of rocking up to one of these exercises that we run a growth sprint, is it's all about defining what we call growth tests. Yeah. In about 7 hours, in a big room with like 50 to 100 people, we facilitate businesses through getting out of their own heads and very quickly prioritizing and aligning around, look, what are some bets that we want to test? If we're going to go after a new market opportunity, let's say that we want to expand our presence in Singapore, or we want to launch a new offer in the US, or actually we've already got a presence in Europe, but we don't know whether to double down on this product or this product. Yeah. Instead of trying to solve that intellectually, we shape some actual tests that can be done from the day after the workshop. Some tests that are going to give you real information to inform your growth journey. And you leave that workshop, not just with the test designed, but ranked and ready to go. So you know the very next day which one you're going to go and execute on. So what is a growth test? Well, here's how we define a growth test. A growth test, rather than a big strategic effort with lots of capital behind it and a big Gantt chart that sits on the wall and people forget about after a month, a growth test is a rapid, low-risk effort to validate or invalidate a growth idea, but importantly, with feedback from the real world. It's not an effort that we just think about and go, well, okay, let's make an internal change, yeah, or let's set up a project. It's a small, bounded experiment, yeah? And over the last 8 years, we've probably helped, I'd say, 100 companies build maybe 400 or 500 different tests that they've gone and executed on. Now, what's great now for the position that we're in is we can look back over that record of all the experiments that people have done and the tests that they've executed on, and we can get information about what's worked and what hasn't worked, yeah? And what we found is the tests that businesses come up with tend to fall into one of two buckets. They either become experiments, in a sense I'll define in a minute, or optimizations. And the best way to help you understand this is through some stories, right? So an experiment is something that probably has more of a digital element to it, yeah? It is borrowed from the field of design thinking and user experience. And there's these types of experiments that companies design. Yeah, so I'm going to knock up a prototype of something really quickly. I'm going to do what's called a solution trial. I might run a quick traffic or pay-per-click campaign. Yeah, I'll split test something, or often called A/B testing. Yeah, and the experiments can look like this. Hopefully, you can see a slide with experiments and 3 different stories on there. Give me a thumbs up if you can see that slide. Yeah, great. The kind of experiments that would fall into this bracket is, let's say, a business from a medical service provider who's actually come through the sprint twice with us now because they valued the process so much the first time, they came back again. They were like, I'm telling the second story there. That medical service provider who were like, we want to get a presence in Texas. We've already done some market research. We think that a good gateway to the US is Austin, right? but we're not quite sure exactly how to launch. Is it a soft launch? Do we deploy a team over there? Do we rent an office? Well, the experiment that they came up with actually in the sprint was for somebody to fly out on the Monday and for them to stop talking about it internally and just go and do a 3-week fact find. Yeah. Now, what that meant was actually booking conversations with potential customers. Yeah. What we would call in UX user interviews. Yeah. And we're just going to do it as an experiment. It's going to cost us about $4 or $5 grand. Yeah. And we're going to go out, and at the end of those 3 weeks, we will know what the next set of tests is to run in Austin. Well, what happened with that business after doing that short bounded experiment is within 6 months, they had an office open. And when they came back on the next sprint, the next experiment actually was which 5 roles were they going to put into that office. Yeah. If I move to the top one, we had a company that came on the sprint where it's a little bit complex, but what they had is they've got a marketplace for helping factories source parts from other factories for machinery. Yeah. Quite a good business, doing really well. But they, in the sprints, they looked and went, do you know what? We're sat on all this data. Yeah, and we don't do anything with that data. What if we did a solution trial where we sold that data and consulted on it with one of our international clients, because they already had a bit of a foothold across Europe. And so they did a test. They did an 8-week test. Well, beautifully, 18 months later, that new offer, which didn't exist, is now 50% of their business. Yeah, because they expanded their footprint and expanded their market offering. And it all started with a small experiment. Yeah. And then we've had lots of other experiments like split testing campaigns on TikTok. For those of you who don't know, split testing is doing 2 versions of the same thing and seeing which one performs better with some data. Yeah, that was a clothing retailer. So you don't need to be a tech business to get a lot from this. They're the kind of experiments people do. What about optimizations, this other bucket of tests? Well, sometimes companies come on a sprint when they're considering new market opportunities. And actually, by going through the process, they realize, you know what? There's things that we really just need to sort out, and that would help us on our growth journey. You know, we've discovered these blockers to take an advantage of a market opportunity. Let's test how we sort those first. So you can see some stories there super quickly. So we had a retailer that came on. They were like, look, we have no clue about the profitability of our inventory items. Yeah, we don't know profitability per product, right? If within 8 weeks, we took one product line and discovered the profitability and swapped out low profitable inventory, literally just swapped it and doubled down on offering our customers the more profitable stuff, we're going to see a profitability bump that we can then reinvest in growth. Yeah. And within 8 weeks, they got a 4% profitability bump. Yeah. Wouldn't that be nice? Just in 8 weeks to make some small tweaks and changes to the offer and see that kind of cash clear up. One company came on a sprint and they said, you know what we just need to do? We're distracted by too many things, right? And we're trying to grow in too many different ways. What if we just put on pause launching that new product and put on pause going and speaking at all those conferences, and instead pointed our sales team at doubling down on the relationships we already have? Well, that company turned 5 million quid worth of new sales in 8 weeks. They were a specialist communications provider to the defense industry. Yeah. And they just warmed up old contacts and started to drive fresh sales. Made a massive difference to their growth. Yeah. Started with a small experiment, or a small optimization, I should say. And then one company that came on it, this is another health tech provider, they came on and said, you know what the biggest blocker to our growth at the minute is that we're trying to raise a round of investment, but we're all over the place as a senior team. Yeah, we are going in different directions. We don't know what we want to put in front of our investors. Let's do an experiment where, what if for the next 4 Fridays, we got together for a full day as a leadership team and wrote the investment deck? Well, 4 months after that, they landed their Series A. And the point is that it all comes down to boiling things down to a highly prioritized growth test, something small that you can make progress on really rapidly. So I tell those stories just to give you a bit of a flavor of the kind of things that we guide you to through the sprint process. Now, if you wanted to do this, you could actually do this afternoon, right? I'm going to give you like the little, I can't talk you through the whole growth sprint approach or how we facilitate through the exercises, but on a piece of paper, I kid you not, you could do this. how do you get to define growth tests for your business? Well, if you've got, I'm assuming that you've got some kind of ambition. You know the kind of market opportunity you want to take advantage of, right? Have to make some kind of assumptions. So let's say that you wanted to expand your footprint in Europe, yeah? And you know that's your growth ambition. What you would do is you would first of all document, okay, and just brainstorm, what are the anchors that are holding me back? What are the things that I need to overcome, yeah, in order to expand that footprint in Europe? The next part of the exercise would be to flip those problems into what's called a how might we question. So how might we is borrowed from the language of design thinking. And what it's about is it's saying, look, if you think about something just as a problem, as a statement, yeah, we have no traction in France. What happens is you just get stuck inside that problem when it's languaged like that. Yeah, you start to analyze the cause instead of starting to define options. So if you flip that problem into a how might we question, how might we double the traffic of visitors to our French website? Yeah, how might we open up a new channel that's French market appropriate? You flip that problem into how might we, what that does is it begins to guide your thinking. Yeah, and it leads your thinking into this, which is a hypothesis. Yeah, or a theory or an idea. Let's kind of remove some of the jargon. The hypothesis being, if I do X, then Y will happen. So my how might we is, how might I double the traffic to my French-speaking website? Yeah. The hypothesis might be, if I throw 500 euros at a split test pay-per-click campaign on Facebook ads, then I would want to see a 10% uplift in visitors. Just starting really small, really discreet. And you set up a hypothesis and then just kick off an 8-week test for that, right? And then use the data and learning from that test to feed into the next cycle and the next cycle and the next cycle. Because here's the thing, what high growth businesses do, they grow their company like software businesses scale products. They're constantly acting and gathering data and then feeding that into the next effort. Yeah. And that's the mode of execution that most small businesses are missing. Yeah, they're just managing chaos or trying to think too big or go after like big investment or capital project, and it all feels really hard instead of distilling stuff down to really discrete tests that constantly inform the growth journey and course correct as they go. That's an exercise you could do this afternoon. Okay, I'll give you that for free. So the growth sprint, as I bring this into land, the growth sprint is part of the offering that the Growth Hub make available in the global scale up program. And Phil will probably talk a little bit about that later. Yeah. If you wanted to come on a growth sprint, you'd be in good company. As I say, we've had about 100 businesses through it from all different sectors, at all different sizes, all with different versions of what growth looks like for them. Yeah. And I've never had a business yet come through a sprint and say it was a waste of time. Yeah. Everybody loves something about a sprint, whether it's an insight it unlocks, a way of working that it gives them, the alignment that it gives the senior team, because it's not just one person that comes on a sprint. You bring like a bunch of members from your senior team. Yeah. And all of those businesses and more that have been through it have started to unlock a way of thinking about growth that's much more iterative and much more high tempo. There's a few braggy slides. I think people will see the slides afterwards, Phil, so I won't talk through these quotes. But yeah, people give us feedback, and we ourselves eat our own, dog food, proverbially, by iterating the growth sprint every time we do it. Yeah, so it's a really well-honed and polished product for now. It's often an in-person event. You can see these photos. These aren't stock photos. These are actual photos from different events that we've done in Manchester on this. Yeah. And you can see a bunch of different types of companies have been through it: manufacturers, food retailers, et cetera, et cetera. I'm going to skip that slide in the interest of time. What I would say is that if you would be interested in getting, a short, sharp intervention that helps you think in this way, and then bake that mode of operating into your business, then come on a growth sprint. Yeah, it's fully funded. Phil would be delighted to talk to you, and I'd be delighted to help you think through the process. So I think I've just hit my 20-minute marker, Phil, and I'll finish there.
Brilliant. Thanks so much, Sean. I mean, I think your passion is clear, and I think that certainly from my perspective, these growth sprints are a huge opportunity for founders, owners, senior teams to step out of their day-to-day business and challenge themselves. And you can see that the passion that Sean has around these growth sprints. So big call to action. If you're interested, or you want to find out more, you're going to give you the sort of contact details at the end of the session. But if you do come along and you're accepted on a growth sprint, you'll actually get to meet Sean in person, and you'll actually get to see some of that passion face to face. So thanks again. That's a great insight.
No
Sean.
problem.
So moving from growth sprints and the ideas of growth into some geographies. So starting here in the UK, closest to home, I'm pleased to introduce you to Christiane Hutchinson, who's going to talk us through some opportunities here right now in the UK. Over to you, Christiane.
Thank you very much, Blair, Philip. And so as said, my name is Christiane Hutchinson. I am founder of Biramis Management Partners in Manchester. We advise our clients on value building strategies and turn those businesses into valuable assets through maturing the right value building blocks and executing ruthlessly. As Sean just said, execution is key. So today, I'm really delighted to be part of the team and introduce you to the UK as a very sizable market right here on our doorstep at a time when we are all striving to do business at as low cost as possible and save on our carbon footprint. So let's have a look at this critical business mass on our doorstep. With 68.7 million people, the UK has the third largest population in Europe. We're behind Russia and Germany. And we have a total UK trade of 1.56 trillion, which is a very large market to grow in this current time, with 74.7 billion in value of export and 89 billion in value of imports. In terms of the industry share of outputs, we have a marked dominance in the financial, professional and business services, FPBS as it's called, and that sector includes retail, hospitality, professional services, business administration and finance. With a gross value added of 1.7 trillion, it represents about 80% of the markets. This is then followed by manufacturing, which at 10% share of the gross value added amounts to 203 billion. The construction at 6% is 129 billion. And while agriculture is, at 0.5%, it provides about half the food we eat here in the UK, and it feeds into the food and drink sector, valued itself at 104 billion, the country's biggest manufacturing sector by turnover. Having a look at this, I'd like to do a little close-up on retail. It deserves consideration when it comes to e-commerce, which represent 30% of all retail sales, and at 120 million is the largest in Europe. Not something that we can ignore. Let us now have a look at the opportunity sectors in the UK over the next couple of slides. The key drivers behind those opportunities listed here are key strategies and goals. One of the top government goals is the decarbonization strategy to be achieved by 2050. And this strategy, as you will see by the diversity of the market opportunity sectors, galvanizes quite a number of sectors and is a very strong binder between seemingly unrelated sectors, from energy to manufacturing to finance. There are opportunities such as offshore wind, civil nuclear, CCU, which is carbon capture and utilization. To strengthen this decarbonization strategy, there is a net zero world-leading ambition as well. Low carbon hydrogen as superfuel is critical to decarbonizing the UK, and Scotland is taking quite a lead on that. Aerospace jet zero strategy is accelerating the transit to cleaner greener technologies. Green finance and innovation, obviously with an objective of reaching net zero, innovative new sources of finance are key to the development of green technologies. This reflects and is strengthened by a strategy for clean growth as well. As such, the chemical sector is well placed to help decarbonization and deliver green growth because the sector basically underpins virtually all manufacturing. Given our trading strength as a country, green shipping, which is supporting international trade activities, is going at the moment through an ongoing transformation rooted in clean growth, digitalization, and automation. Behind all this, another strong driver is the strong UK tech, which is growing at a faster rate than the economy. The combined value of UK tech companies is now about 540 billion, and it stands in the context of the digital revolution. So the applications are vast and many, and you will see through all the sectors listed, the UK technology ecosystem has centers of excellence across the UK with specialisms such as fintech, financial services, computer science, cybersecurity, data analytics, AI. The AR and VR are on target to reach 62.5 billion by 2030, while the creative industry is currently worth around 115 billion. The head tech is growing at a rate of about 70%. And fintech itself is a global hub and accounts for about 11% of the global industry. So these are sectors to look for. There is also competitive advantages in the UK, which are linked to specific science pools. Biopharma is a vibrant international industry, and at its core, this industry has developed about 36.7 billion of annual turnover and given way to a service and supply chain as well, which in itself is 18 billion. So as we know, the UK played a major role in breakthroughs such as the Genome Project and had a leading role in the formation of the Biobank. MedTech is one of the UK's key themes in the life science visions to support the NHS to test, purchase and spread innovative technologies more effectively. There is also, of course, the traditional industries that are embracing the technology and the digital age: manufacturing, engineering, food and drinks, textiles, materials, building, which give way to opportunities such as the clean agri-tech, greener buildings, sustainable infrastructure. So what I would say here is think of your business and how it sits vis-a-vis those drivers in order to create some adaptive strategies and avail of market opportunities. Now, closer to home, obviously, we are sitting here in Manchester, which is the largest regional economy with a GVA worth 74.8 billion. And what makes Manchester so dynamic is it's very active at implementing the technology and decarbonization strategy with a few distinctive core competencies given the science and engineering legacy that it has. So we have here in Manchester advanced manufacturing with a 61 million investment into the National Graphene Institute. And Manchester is also home to the National Institute for Material Science Research and Innovation. Within that, there are support services for graphene, technical textiles, surfaces and coatings, composites and light alloys. On our doorstep, we also have Europe's largest purpose-built industry ecosystem at Media City for the creative and media industry. And this is coupled with a heritage of broadcasting and media production. And at its side, we have animation, gaming, AR and VR as well. This is adjacent to the digital and technology sector. Manchester is home to a thriving 5 billion ecosystem altogether and is officially the UK top digital tech city. There is a business eco-diversity here, from startups to SMEs to global brands. Google, Boohoo, the Hut Group, there are more than 10,000 businesses collaborating to drive innovation. And recently, The cybersecurity sector is also adding its presence with the Northwest Cyber Force located in different areas. But Manchester, with its thriving business base, is also the home to a very dynamic and strong financial and business services, because it is the only hub outside London that has all the elements of the subsectors represented at scale. I'm talking about banking, financial services, fintech, insurance, accounting, legal. The net zero is also a strong driver in Manchester, because the city has the aim to be carbon neutral by 2038, which is 12 years ahead of the UK 2050 targets. There is even a green economy marketplace, www.greeneconomy.co.uk, where you can find suppliers. And of course, in order to boost all these activities, there is green finance with the Greater Manchester Environment Fund, the UK First. As part of this agenda, retrofitting is high on the agenda, and there are many projects there, as well as major development projects to showcase the scale of low carbon commitments across the city. Mayfield, the Gateway North. In terms of the local core competencies, the life sciences and healthcare market opportunities are quite well developed. We have world-leading R&D assets with the Manchester Cancer Research Centre, the UK Biobank, which are working on innovative treatments and revolutionize patient care. We also have here a devolved control of a 6 billion health and social care budget. And through Health Innovation Manchester, the life science companies can benefit from a developed, streamlined innovation adoption pathway, which can stimulate and help growth. So the region really is very digitally focused and is combining its digital capabilities with infrastructure. This is an enabler to the local economy. So I hope that this has encouraged you to think about positioning or perhaps repositioning your business, because beyond the fears we may have for the few months ahead, there is a strong pulse here of an economy that is large and is there for us to partake in. So do not retreat in the face of challenges. Instead, seek support, find a position, adapt to the drivers that are going to take you forward. So contact us to find out more, and we can guide you in the right direction. Go for it, and all the very best from me.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Christiane. And I think it's certainly from an international perspective, which is my focus. Quite often, when we have discussions with business and they have global, international aspirations, one of the first things we talk about is, well, are you sure that you've really, exploited, the UK and the opportunities, not just in the UK, but here in Greater Manchester. So thank you very much for that, Christiane. Conscious of time, so we could probably spend just a few hours talking through all of the opportunities that I guess that we believe are out there. But next, I'd like to introduce you to Christos from the Department for International Trade, who's going to talk us through, I think, again, some really exciting opportunities in our biggest, closest neighbour, Europe. Over to you, Christos.
Thank you, Phil. Thanks for the invitation. My name is Christos Kottis, and I'm the export manager for Greater Manchester, working for the Department for International Trade. Today, we're discussing the massive trade opportunities the UK has with Europe, one of our 4 key markets here in Greater Manchester, together with the US, China, and India, as per our international trade strategy. Europe is still our largest trading partner, with over $500 billion of bilateral trade every single year. The US is about a third of that, just to give you an idea, as it stands, although, of course, the US as a country is, of course, our largest trading partner. It's worth noting some interesting stats on our trade with the EU from the Office for National Statistics. Although the referendum took place back in 2016, the actual EU exit happened in January 2020. And 3 months later, we had the pandemic, the COVID pandemic, and we went into our first lockdown shortly after. So as the landscape started to improve and some stability in European trade returned, then we had Russia's invasion to the Ukraine in February this year. So instead of comparing whole year's worth of trade, where obviously in 2020 we would be down against 2019, and 2021 was even worse against 2020, I thought I'd give you the latest trend, which is 12 months to September this year, because this is more interesting. So comparing 12 months to September versus the previous 12 months. So you won't hear that in the media, of course, but actually our trade with the EU is recovering very fast. In terms of goods, we are up in all our top 10 markets, as you can see on the slide. It's worth noting France, particularly 28.3%, Belgium 30%, Ireland 32%, and the Netherlands with an amazing 46%. I've got the figures here for the next 10 countries, and only Romania and Hungary were slightly down. But I'd like to mention Denmark, that was 21% up. My birthplace, Greece, which was 23% up. Finland, 40%. And the highest increase of all top 20 countries, Luxembourg, was 58% up on last year. I don't have the stats for services because they're always a year behind goods, but we can expect a similar improving picture. What I thought is important to remind everyone is that Europe, or the European market, is not just the European Union. So let me give you two quick examples. Did you know that Switzerland represents our 7th largest market globally in bilateral trade? A smallish country, you can argue. It's actually the world's 22nd economy, so just outside the G20. Our goods trade with Switzerland more than doubled in the 12 months to September this year. And the other way, their goods trade to the UK, so what we import from them, also grew 20%. We have now signed a trade agreement with Switzerland covering goods, intellectual property, government procurement, which is worth a lot of money. And we have similar opportunities that I think is worth exploring with countries like Norway, Iceland, Liechtenstein, and as well as some other markets you'll see at the bottom there. Particularly in Greater Manchester, we have 11,000 exporters worth £15 billion of export value every year. So we are one of the largest markets outside of London and the Southeast. Again, our overall goods exports increased in 2021, although understandably we're still a bit down on pre-COVID levels. And after the US, which is our biggest market, we can tot up Germany, the Netherlands, France. Even just those three, you can see why Europe is still our biggest market here in Greater Manchester. In terms of sectors, machinery and transport equipment is our biggest sector, followed by chemicals. You can see the figures on the slide. In terms of services, we're quite a bit more down compared to pre-COVID levels, which again is understandable if you think that international travel completely stopped. There were no trade shows, no exhibitions, no other activities for networking, business development. But it's recovering again. The US by far is our biggest market in services. It's followed up by Germany, the Netherlands, Switzerland. We love Switzerland, and Ireland. As you may be aware, and Christiane mentioned it, financial and insurance services are #1 sector, followed by scientific and technical activities. Not all services were down, by the way. Information and communication up 88%. Surprise, surprise. We all use Teams and Zoom and Livestorm and platforms like this one. Also manufacturing, real estate, scientific and technical were up. All the other sectors are still behind pre-COVID levels, but are catching up. So we showed you that our exports are recovering, but why is this? As soon as we exited the EU, we signed our largest, most comprehensive free trade agreement with the EU. It's called the TCA, or the Trade and Cooperation Agreement, which is a tariff and quota free trade. That's what it offers in terms of British goods. Of course, there's now additional paperwork. You've heard of the EORI numbers on forms. We have to comply with the rules of origins. But once you get used to working with these new sets of regulations, you're well set up to grow your exports with our biggest markets, worth over 550 billion every year. And as we said earlier, there are some very attractive non-EU European markets. We have signed FTAs with 10 of them, like Norway, like Switzerland. So we do cover 99% of UK-Europe trade. Certain sectors there I mentioned on this slide, obviously low carbon, health. We are market leaders in things like clean energy, digital. So despite the Russia-Ukraine war, which won't be around forever, hopefully, things will recover. Just my last slide is we do have a large team of international trade advisors or ITAs, 10 of which are just covering Greater Manchester, and they are here to help you on your export journey. Our service is completely free, funded by the British taxpayer. So whether it's you need a business plan, whether you want to explore free funding, which is available through various programs, or you may need finance for a larger project, just contact us. I won't go through every bullet point there, but we have the Export Academy, which is free to join. It has 10 modules that you can complete and get the basics right for your export journey. And also, just in Europe, we have 330 staff based in the market, so 33 countries, which again we have access to and we can call upon to help you on your journey. So we do global missions. You can join us for a trade show in Europe. So please just use this free service because it's there for you. Thank you. These are contact details for anyone in the Northwest or for Greater Manchester businesses. We're here to help you. Thank you very much.
Brilliant. Thanks so much, Christos. And I think there is, a key point there, which is, I think you could be forgiven, I think, if you just listen to the media that that actually, business in Europe is super tough. So I think it's really good to hear that actually, it is possible. Okay, yes, there are some, more challenges, but there's still huge, opportunities for our for trade in Europe. So thanks for that very much, Christos. So next on, so again, sort of moving further east, we're now going to move to India with our guest, Shehla and Jack. Over to you, Shehla.
Thank you very much, Phil, and it's a pleasure to be here. And so I will start with, a little bit about India and also perhaps, move on to some of the sectors that we are focusing on. So India is currently the fastest growing economy in the world, but perhaps one of the most complex markets. And the stats are phenomenal in the sense that, April to June 2022 quarter reported an eye-watering 13.5% increase in the GDP growth rate, but it's going to settle to little under 6% by the end of the financial year due to reduced global demand because of the war and pandemic and the rest of the world going into recession. Very recently, India has moved past the UK to become the 5th largest economy in the world. And it is projected that it's going to be the 3rd largest economy by 2027. During the pandemic, 106 unicorns were born in India from nothing, making India the 3rd largest country for unicorns after the US and China. It's a 3.3 trillion economy with digital payments at 1/3 of the GDP. Over 1/8 of the world's population lives in India. So you can imagine the scale of the domestic market there. India has the highest number of Facebook users and is the 2nd largest online market globally after And why is it complex? It is complex because of the federal nature of the Indian polity. India is divided into, India has 29 different states. So basically, you are looking at 29 different markets, which could be assets or could be risk baskets, depending on how you look at it. Every state has its own state government, which has its rules, which may be different from each other, the number of clearances, the number of licenses that you would need to enter the market. So, you will have to be guided well before you start looking at a complicated market like India. But having said that, I would also want to emphasize the fact that the UK and India have come close together like never before, and and talks are underway for a UK-India free trade agreement, and 7 rounds of negotiations have already completed, with the next one slated for December, that is next month. And the focus is on getting the free trade agreement right, so that um, for the UK, it is like opening up a market of 1.3 billion consumers, which is a huge market. And some of the complications that your business might encounter would be technical barriers to trade, high import duties, immigration related issues, intellectual property, and data security. So some of these topics are up for negotiation and discussion as we speak in the UK-India free trade agreement. In the next few slides, what we have tried to do is to map Greater Manchester's strengths with opportunities in India. So advanced manufacturing is an obvious one, with electric vehicles being a clear opportunity. India only recently had its net zero target at 2070, which is rather later than the rest of the world. But then, the number of especially the startups in the startup world, sustainability is a huge area of interest. So sustainable manufacturing, electric vehicles, these are some of the areas which can be looked at. Life sciences and education. Basically, life sciences, it's one of the greatest success stories that came out of the pandemic was India and UK partnering for the COVID vaccine. So, AstraZeneca, University of Oxford, and Serum Institute of India, which produced over 1 billion doses of the COVID vaccine, which was used worldwide. I think that's a huge success story in which UK and India can partner, and that's kind of a benchmark that's been established. Some of the ongoing partnerships between Greater Manchester and India in life sciences is University of Manchester and Tata Medical Center for Pediatric Oncology. There is a huge a transfer of knowledge and research going on for that. Then also Indian Institute of Science and University of Manchester, University of Bolton, and Apollo Med Skills. So, these are some of the ongoing partnerships, but we are just scratching the surface here. There's a lot more to be done. And, Manchester India Partnership stands ready to support Greater Manchester-based businesses looking for opportunities in India. The other two sectors are education, for example, and a higher education in a British university is the dream of every Indian student, who's looking to internationalize his or her career. So there are some ongoing collaborations between the University of Salford with Karnataka State Higher Education Board, University of Manchester with the Geo Institute, which has recently been set up in India, owned by one of the richest people in the world, the Ambanis. So, there is huge scope for, ed tech, especially, education in person, but virtually also. Creative, digital, and tech. India has shown the world about, what it is to be technologically, especially in the IT, creative, digital sector. And most of the world's largest IT companies started from India. So this is definitely an area of strength, but again, a huge opportunity for um, British companies to look at India, to sell their products and their niche products, and having a great IP. So, and as we go forward, what we see is that there will be a huge gap in digital skills in both UK and India. So what we've tried to do is, around the Digital City Festival, next year in March, in the last week of March, we propose to hold a Manchester, India Digital Skills Conference, to which all of you are invited. Basically, this one, we will be hosting our first ever Manchester, India Digital Skills Seminar, and we would like to invite everybody, for attending or even sponsoring. We would be very happy to consider that. And just going backwards, we have, through Manchester, India partnership, our tagline is unleashing the power of our networks. So, we are very well networked, not only in Greater Manchester, but in India. On our board is the CII, which is India's apex chamber of commerce, as well as FICCI, Department of International Trade, here in the Northwest, in Manchester, as well as the huge network we have in India through the British High Commission. Invest India, which is India's nodal agency for hand-holding foreign companies coming into India. We have our network with them. So, come to us. We will be very happy to, support you in your globalization and internationalization ambitions and going to India. And my colleague, Jack Mitchell-Wilkinson, who's the project manager, and myself, we stand ready to support you. Thank you very much.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Shehla. I think it's a difficult, market to ignore, and I think the sheer size. And I think it's interesting that you address the sort of complexity, but there's clearly, there's a huge amount of support here available through the organizations that you've articulated. So it's a huge opportunity. And I think particularly, in some areas, things like sort of areas like creative, that businesses wouldn't necessarily think about. So thank you very much for that. Last but not least, we're going to run over slightly by a few minutes, but hopefully that's not a problem. We're going to finish the session with a quick discussion on China. So I'd like to hand over to Yunyang from the Manchester China Forum. Thank you very much.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for having me today. So my name is Yunyang. I'm the project manager at Manchester China Forum, and I'll be speaking about China market opportunities. So before jumping in about, speaking about China in general, first, a little bit of overview on the bilateral trade between the UK and China. So despite the pandemic and all the economic challenges in the past few years, we still are, so China is still the UK's fourth largest trading partner. And in terms of export, we're the sixth largest export partner. And the last sentence shows some of the most popular products that the UK has been exporting to China, including cars and crude oil and etc. So the second slides just give a brief, overview in terms of like region for exports and imports to China and from China. So let's just look at the goods export in 2021 to China. So Greater Manchester belongs to the Northwest region, and this Northwest region accounts for 12% of the total export to China, and that's 1.8 billion pounds. So the sheer size of it, it's quite impressive. So that still means there's quite a lot of opportunities despite some challenges. So in terms of key facts and figures for China, China's population is at 1.4 billion, with an urban population estimated at 920 million. Sorry, but it's sort of like a cliche, just emphasizing on the population size of China. More importantly, we need to look at the growing middle class and upper class. So currently, the middle class now stands at over 400 million people, and there's a rapid growth in demand for quality goods and services. There's also a widening consumer base, which means that there's huge growth potential across lower tier markets. So that's tier 2 plus cities or rural regions in China. So in terms of internet access, currently there's over 1.02 billion internet users in China, and the internet penetration rate is at 74.4%. As briefly mentioned by Shehla, so India is just after China in terms of, I guess, online market. So again, e-market plays a huge role in Chinese retail habits, accounting for around 25% of all retail purchases. I think this figure is even more impressive in terms of how the younger generation in China responds to their consumer habits. So 71% of Chinese consumers are said that they're happy to shop directly on social media or social commerce platforms. That's 30% higher than the global average. And millennials and Gen Z even at 80%. There's also a growing trend for shopping through live stream. This might be a bit unfamiliar, but this is definitely a growing trend in China, and it's getting more popular and popular. So in terms of key market opportunities, this is just, I guess, a brief overview of some of the sectors that I highlighted. But again, opportunities are more than just what's written down here. So for example, food and drink, China is expected to be the world's largest grocery market by 2023. So that's next year. And there's a growing demand for safer and quality food. And there's also like the policies in China, it's improving. It's been improving a wider range of UK products. So before there was some limitations on export and trade, but now the restrictions are loosening, and there's definitely a positive trend. In terms of health, life science and healthcare, so it's currently the second largest healthcare market in the world, with a double-digit growth actually. And with China's aging population, policy-led healthcare reform, there's definitely more demand for quality healthcare in the future. So this captures some of the opportunities. And of course, finally, energy, environment, and low carbon. So China has its 2030 carbon peak agenda, and its carbon neutrality agenda sits as 2050. And as we all know, Greater Manchester's has this 2038 net zero ambitions. So the two countries can definitely work together in terms of knowledge and experience sharing and research collaboration and technology. So thank you. That's a very brief overview of China market opportunities. And finally, I do want to bring this topic of COVID restrictions and challenges. I think it's really important to note that COVID doesn't go on forever. So this is of course an ongoing challenge, but it wouldn't last forever. And if someone monitors the trend in terms of COVID restrictions for businesses, foreign businesses, and foreign travelers especially, you'll find that over the past 6 months, I would say especially, there's definitely a very, I'd say, encouraging sign of loosening restrictions for not only domestically, but also across the world. And finally, it's also very important to note that, again, despite the current challenges, the sheer size of the China market and the opportunities, not only in one sector, but also across various industries, are still there. So I'd still say it's definitely worth considering. So feel free to contact me at the both email addresses provided on the screen. And thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Yunyang. So that concludes our sort of whistle-stop tour of the world. There's obviously quite a few geographies that we haven't covered, but that was it for today. I mean, I think one of the things that came out loud and clear across all of those geographies that we've covered is the opportunity around net zero. Every single speaker has talked about, the transition to net zero, and I think the scale of that, opportunity globally for businesses, here in Manchester is huge. So I would encourage any business that is looking for support. We have a great green team here in the Business Growth Hub. We've had a few questions, but to be honest, most of those questions have been answered proactively. So we had a specific question on COVID in China, Yunyang, but you've asked that, and we had a question, Sean, on whether or not the sprint methodology applied to businesses outside sort of Silicon Valley, and I think you've nailed that one as well. So thank you very much. We've got a bunch more opportunities coming up. So we've got what we call some Strive and Thrive interactive workshops happening, one before the end of the calendar year, and then a couple going into January. All it really leaves is for me to say thank you very much for attending today. If you'd like to get the slides, there's a QR code there that'll take you to an email address, or if you've got any questions that you want to think about or you've thought about after today's sessions, please don't hesitate to contact us. So I'd like to thank all the speakers very much for supporting us here today in this webinar, and thank you very much for everyone who's dialed in. Thank you.
Thank you, Phil.
Thanks, folks.
Thanks, everyone.
Cheers.
Thank you,
Bye.
everyone. Bye.
Thank you very much.